You've heard the headlines, you've seen the alerts, but what's really happening with America's place in the world? We're talking about a dramatic overhaul, a foreign policy earthquake, with the ground literally shifting beneath our feet.
That's right. For decades, the U.S. often took, well, the lead role in global affairs. Now we're seeing a definite pivot towards a bold new doctrine, prioritizing national interests in a way not seen in generations.
And it's not just a minor adjustment, is it?
No, not at all. It's a wholesale redesign, really, and it profoundly impacts our ally, our adversaries. Everyone, basically. It's setting the stage for a whole new global order.
So today we're taking a deep dive into this new America First agenda as it's playing out right now under the current administration in 2025. We want to understand that vision.
Exactly. From securing what the administration sees as, America's own backyard.
Right, the Americas.
To redrawing battle lines and alliances overseas, we'll explore how these, frankly, dramatic moves are reshaping global trade, defense partnerships, even the balance of power between the world's biggest players.
Our mission today is to pull out the core insights from the sources we've gathered, articles, research papers, policy notes, just to help you understand this massive geopolitical transformation that's happening.
We'll unpack the driving forces behind it, look at the concrete actions being taken in key regions, and, importantly, examine the potential implications for an international system that seems to be rapidly losing its old guardrails.
Okay, so forget what you thought you knew about America's role in the world. Our sources reveal a truly seismic shift underway, redrawing global power lines right before our very eyes. All right, let's unpack this foundational change first. Our sources show a really fundamental shift in U.S. foreign policy. For decades, since World War II, the world operated largely under what scholars call global liberal hegemony.
Right. Think of it like the U.S. acting as the main global superpower, pushing for things like democracy, free markets, international cooperation, through big organizations like the UN or NATO.
But now the U.S. is moving away from that, moving towards a new doctrine, spheres of influence. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, what's really fascinating here, especially if you look at the contrast between the administration's first term and the second one, is the level of integration.
How so?
Our research suggests the first term was, well, one source actually described it as a mishmash of unilateralism, transactionalism, economic nationalism, and nascent retrenchment.
A bit chaotic then.
Basically, yeah. A bit chaotic, often slowed down by internal resistance from, let's say, more traditional figures. But now, in the second term, the administration appears much more cohesive and integrated. And the real insight here is seeing how a more consolidated domestic power base translates directly into a far more coherent and, frankly, assertive foreign policy.
That's a huge point. So this increased coherence, what does it mean for global policy? And for you listening, our sources point to three key factors enabling this shift. First, the administration is now largely filled with MAGA loyalists, as one source puts it.
People unlikely to resist policy implementation.
Exactly, which reduces the influence of those establishment figures who might have pushed back before.
Right. And second, we're seeing the impact of significant preparation. Things like Project 2025, for instance. That provided a ready-made template to implement the MAGE agenda across the U.S. government.
So they hit the ground running this time.
Much more so. And third, you have to remember, the administration entered office in 2025 with pretty strong political momentum. They won the November 2024 election by a bigger margin than in 2016, apparently facing what sources describe as a demoralized political opposition.
Okay, so that all creates a powerful domestic platform.
Definitely. And this strengthened domestic position raises a really important question. How does it actually translate into foreign policy? A policy that, as one source vividly describes it, now pursues a coercive, rapacious, power-driven approach in some regions.
Wow, strong words.
Yeah, while at the same time intentionally granting requisite space and freedom to rivals like Russia and China in their own backyards.
So carving up the world, essentially.
It creates what our analysis calls a tripolar structure, basically, a world shaped by three dominant powers: the U.S., Russia, and China. And in this structure, great power interests and aggression are, well, privileged. It's a major departure from previous approaches.
Okay, here's where this new doctrine gets really interesting, especially close to home. Our sources detail the U.S. actively working to sort of solidify its perceived sphere of influence. And this isn't small, it covers the entire Americas, right? From the Arctic way down to South America.
Correct, and including the North Pacific and Atlantic Oceans as well. The clear goal seems to be keeping rival powers, think Russia and China, at a very long arm's length away.
Now, the Monroe Doctrine, that's been around forever, hasn't it?
Yeah.
How is this different?
Well, historically, the Monroe Doctrine from 1823 focused on opposing European powers, rivals physically present in Latin America. But now, one report notes, the administration seems to be trying to revive and broaden the term.
Broaden.
By incorporating Upper North America and even the Arctic into this sphere, it's not just about drawing lines on a map, it's about extending America's protective buffer zone to a, frankly, massive scale.
And this isn't just defensive, right? It's not just about blocking rivals.
No, it seems explicitly about gaining advantages for the U.S. Our sources highlight some pretty provocative claims, like the administration reportedly broaching the issue of seizing territory from allies.
Seizing territory.
Right.
From allies like Panama, Canada, Greenland. That sounds extreme. How do the sources suggest this would actually happen? Is it military action?
Yeah, it's important to clarify that point. The sources we reviewed depict this not as, military invasion, but more as aggressive diplomatic and economic pressure.
Oh, okay. Pressure to do what?
To force concessions. The stated goal, according to these reports, is to extract raw material power and tighten America's influence. They're aiming for tangible benefits.
Such as?
Things like more military bases, cheaper shipping rates, changes in the terms of trade to America's advantage, and greater control over natural resources. It's a very, very transactional approach to diplomacy, even with close allies.
And there's a concrete example of this in the materials, isn't there? With Canada.
Yes, exactly. The administration's alleged role in toppling Justin Trudeau from power in Canada. This led to a new prime minister, Mark Carney, who sources suggest might be more willing to negotiate on these kinds of terms.
Wow. So that shows a very direct, assertive strategy. Reshaping relationships, even with neighbors, purely for America's economic and security benefit.
It does. It's a stark reminder that under this doctrine, even close allies might face significant pressure.
Okay, so we've established this focus on dominance in the Americas. But this America First doctrine isn't stopping there.
Yeah.
What about long-standing alliances across the Atlantic? Let's turn to Europe. Our sources point to a very distinct policy of retrenchment, signaling a really different kind of engagement. This apparently includes weakening America's commitment to NATO, maybe troop downsizing, even removal from Europe.
This is, look, a monumental shift. The administration has made it manifestly clear, according to one source, that it's now up to the Europeans to provide military assistance and security guarantees to Ukraine going forward.
So the U.S. is stepping back from Ukraine.
The belief seems to be that the U.S. is done protecting Ukraine, and more than that, has been ripped off for past contributions. And we're seeing this play out. The U.S. has reportedly signed off on Russia keeping Crimea and approximately 20% of Ukraine's eastern territory.
Wow, that's a huge concession.
It is, and it's a clear outcome of this new approach.
Understandably, this stance has caused alarm in Ukraine and European capitals. Our sources call it a tough, realistic approach. But what are the specific concerns coming out of Europe, according to the materials?
Well, the European concern, as highlighted in our materials, is really about the precedent this sets, the potential for increased Russian aggression if there isn't that unified U.S.-backed front.
And one source uses really strong language, right? Saying the administration essentially lets Putin off the hook for war crimes, or starting a war, by painting Ukraine as an aggressor.
It absolutely does. That wording definitely highlights how controversial this shift is. But the change in U.S. policy, reportedly, is driven by several things.
Like what?
Including, apparently, the administration's respect for leaders of what it sees as formidable, powerful nations, leaders like Russia's Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping.
Interesting.
It reflects a belief that the U.S. should prioritize its own resources, encourage allies to shoulder more of their own defense burden rather than expecting America to constantly protect them.
So pay your own way, basically.
Essentially. And remember, one source we saw, I think it was a Reddit analysis, estimated that if Europe were to fully replace the U.S. security contribution, well, they'd need to raise defense spending significantly to maybe 4-6% of GDP.
Compared to what the U.S. spends now.
Compared to the U.S. currently spending around 3% of its $27 trillion GDP. So it really puts the financial burden into perspective for European nations.
Okay, moving beyond Europe now, let's shift focus to China and the Indo-Pacific. Despite some, tough talk, Our sources suggest the administration isn't actually seeking a big tussle with Beijing. Is that right?
That seems to be the case. Instead, the primary focus appears to be on making economic deals.
Wow, deals again.
Deals again, often using tariffs as a coercive means to that end. It looks more like a strategic dance, maybe, than an outright confrontation.
And this strategy is pretty direct.
Oh yeah, quite direct and, frankly, aggressive. Documents show tariffs on Chinese goods spiked way up to 145% in April, before being pulled back to roughly 30% in May, but only for a 90-day reprieve.
So applying maximum pressure.
Exactly. The administration has expressed optimism about Beijing eventually coming to the negotiating table. But, one source notes that during the first term, a Phase 1 trade deal was signed.
Right, I remember that.
But China apparently failed to meet this target. In fact, they imported even less than before the trade war started. So that history explains the continued pressure now.
Okay, so what does this focus on deals mean for the economic balance, especially regarding, say, critical allies like Taiwan?
Well, this is where the transactional nature really comes through. Our sources reveal the administration has openly questioned whether defending Taiwan is actually in America's national interest.
Really? Questioning the defense of Taiwan.
There's one quote that's pretty stark. It says, "Taiwan should pay us for defense. We're no different than an insurance company. Taiwan doesn't give us anything."
Wow. Framing alliances like an insurance policy.
Exactly. It demands tangible benefits for American support rather than seeing alliances as, inherently strategic partnerships based on shared values or long-term goals.
And there's another economic move targeting China. Right. Something about packages.
Yes, the administration has actively moved to end the $800 de minimis exemption on low-value packages.
What's that exactly?
It was a loophole, basically. It allowed items under $800, mainly from Chinese e-commerce giants like Shein and AliExpress, to enter the U.S. without tariffs or much scrutiny.
Ah, so that's how all those cheap packages got through.
Pretty much. It led to a massive, over 1,000% increase in shipments by 2023. Ending it is expected to directly hit China's economy, slow Chinese export growth by 1.3 percentage points, and GDP growth by 0.2 point, according to one analysis.
So a very targeted move to level the economic playing field.
Precisely.
Okay, shifting gears again. Let's look at the Middle East and Africa. Here we see another pattern emerging described as partial retrenchment. What does that look like?
Well, for example, reports indicate U.S. troop levels in Syria are being cut significantly by half to under 1,000. The thinking seems to be that the Syrian civil war is largely over, and Iran's regional influence is seen by the administration as waning.
But it's not a complete pullout.
No, not entirely. The Abraham Accords, which were seen as a hallmark foreign policy achievement of the first term.
Right, normalizing relations between Israel and several Arab nations.
Exactly. Those are reportedly being expanded, potentially bringing Saudi Arabia and Israel even closer together.
So the approach there is fostering stability through these diplomatic agreements, rather than a large military presence.
That seems to be the idea, allowing the U.S. to maintain its interests in the region without that heavy military footprint. It's, you could say, a more nimble form of engagement.
What about Africa?
In Africa, the administration is reportedly moving quickly to downsize America's presence. Our sources even suggest they're considering eliminating U.S. Africa Command entirely.
Wow, AFRICOM.
Yeah. Or maybe scrapping USAI, the foreign aid agency whose mission historically included promoting human rights.
That's a big change. What are the implications?
Well, one source notes quite pointedly that this shift should endear the Trump administration to African countries that have poor human rights records.
So it highlights that specific, maybe controversial consequence of prioritizing purely national interests over broader concerns like human rights.
Right. But even with this retrenchment across regions, counterterrorism does remain a distinct priority.
How so?
We're still seeing low-cost airstrikes against groups like the Houthis, ISIS, Haraz al-Din. These offer, as one source puts it, clear deliverables to domestic audiences.
So targeted action for direct American security.
Exactly. It reflects a very targeted use of force, focused squarely on immediate American security concerns, quite distinct from any broader nation-building or stabilization efforts we've seen in the past. It's about protecting U.S. interests with minimal resource allocation.
Okay, so bringing all these threads together. Americas, Europe, China, Middle East, Africa. What emerges from our sources is potentially a much larger vision at play here. A new global order managed, in essence, by the big three, the U.S., Russia, and China. We're even hearing about this profound idea of a three-way summit with Putin and Xi, aimed at cutting nuclear arsenals and defense spending.
Yes, that concept is definitely described in our sources. It's talked about as a kind of great power collusion or a concert system.
A concert system,
Yeah.
like the concert of Europe back in the 19th century.
Sort of, yeah. Imagine a world where these strongmen, as the source calls them, work together to impose a shared vision of order on the rest of the world.
And the foundation for this could be, what, a pact?
Potentially a non-aggression pact among the three superpowers, something that clearly defines their respective spheres of influence to try and reduce conflict risks between them. It's a very pragmatic, power-based approach to international relations.
So this isn't global governance in the way we usually think about it, promoting universal values or broad international cooperation through institutions.
Not at all. It's more about powerful nations pragmatically managing things to ensure their own interests and maybe ideally from their perspective, a kind of top-down global stability.
It's a really stark contrast to previous American approaches that aimed for a more liberal world order based on a wider set of shared principles, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's fundamentally different.
And the future of this doctrine, is this just tied to the current administration, or could it last longer?
That's a key question. One source does indicate that if the current Vice President J.D. Vance were to win in 2028, he is likely to keep and perhaps lean even more into a spheres of influence doctrine.
So, suggesting this could be a long-term, maybe even foundational shift in American foreign policy, lasting beyond just one administration.
That's the potential, yes.
Okay. So we've taken a deep dive today into America's rapidly changing foreign policy landscape. It really is a world where the U.S. is redefining its global role, asserting its interest in very direct, sometimes quite aggressive ways, and prompting other nations, allies, and adversaries alike to fundamentally recalibrate their own strategies.
Absolutely. From demanding more from allies financially and militarily to imposing these new kinds of economic pressures on rivals, this America First approach in its current form is certainly shaking up the international system.
It really challenges the old norms, doesn't it?
It does. And it forces us and forces policymakers around the world to confront some very difficult questions about power, sovereignty, and what national interest really means in the 21st century.
So looking back at everything we've covered, what really stands out to you from this deep dive?
Well, in a world that does seem to be rapidly forming this tripolar structure,
Yeah.
U.S., Russia, China prioritizing national spheres of influence certainly creates clearer boundaries, perhaps. But the provocative thought I'm left with is this. Will these clear boundaries actually lead to greater global stability? Or could they end up unleashing unchecked aggression precisely because those old international guardrails seem to be disappearing?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. And it's a future we'll all be watching unfold very closely.